What the actual hell? I step out at 6 a.m. in my boxers, my lawn's destroyed. 16 massive mailbox towers, fridge-sized, cemented in neat rows where my azaleas once bloomed, driveway blocked, coffee steaming in my fist, ready to fly. HOA president stands there smirking with her fake smile.
Community mail upgrade. Isn't it great?
Great? You turned my yard into a UPS depot without asking. Wet concrete stinks, diesel burns my eyes, and that smug wave? This wasn't a mistake. It was war. See, Vivian thought she could steamroll a retired Navy mechanic. Wrong move. Because at midnight, I had a plan. Those mailboxes, they weren't staying put. The twist? When she called the sheriff for help, his response had me dying laughing. What would you do if someone hijacked your property overnight? Drop your city below and smash that like, because this revenge story is about to teach every HOA bully a lesson they'll never forget. My name's Jake Morrison, and 3 months ago I thought I'd finally escaped the chaos. 45 years old, 20-year Navy veteran, fresh out of the messiest divorce this side of hell. My ex-wife got the fancy house in San Diego. I got my tools and enough settlement money to start over somewhere quiet. Pinewood Springs looked perfect on paper. Modest ranch house, decent neighborhood, the kind of place where you wave at neighbors and actually mean it. After 20 years fixing Navy helicopters in cramped engine bays, I figured I'd start a handyman business, help folks with honest work at fair prices, maybe find some peace in my garage workshop. That's when I met my new nemesis. Vivian Ashworth rolled up in her spotless white Lexus 3 days after I moved in. 62 years old, perfectly coiffed silver hair, manicured nails that have never touched actual dirt. Married to Richard Ashworth, retired VP from First National Bank, the same bank that financed half the mortgages in this subdivision back in the 90s. "Welcome to Pinewood Springs," she chirped, clipboard already in hand like she was conducting a property inspection. "I'm the HOA president. We maintain very high standards here." Standing in my driveway, the chemical smell of her expensive perfume mixing with the honest scent of motor oil from my work truck, I should have recognized the warning signs. The way her eyes cataloged every tool in my garage, every callus on my hands from decades of wrench work. See, Pinewood Springs started as middle-class family housing, 340 homes built during the housing boom, filled with teachers, nurses, retirees, and working folks. But as the tech corridor expanded nearby, property values exploded. Suddenly, everyone's terrified about maintaining investment potential. And Vivian? She's the self-appointed guardian of that investment. The neighborhood runs on fear of her retaliation. Cross Vivian, get buried in violation notices, legal fees, and social isolation until you sell at a loss and disappear. I learned this from Eddie Kowalski, my 70-year-old neighbor, retired electrician with thick Polish accent who's been documenting her tactics for years. She forced out to Henderson's in 2020, he told me over his back fence, voice barely above a whisper. Nice family, but wrong skin color for her taste. Violation after violation until they gave up. My first taste of Vivian's methods came 2 weeks after moving in. I painted my mailbox navy blue, respectful shade honoring my service, looked professional against the white post. I was proud of it, standing there with the summer evening heat radiating off the asphalt, listening to kids playing basketball 3 streets over. 3 days later, an official violation notice appeared in that same mailbox. The letterhead felt cheap between my fingers, but the threat was expensive. Unapproved mailbox modification. Fine. $150, increasing $50 daily until compliance. I checked my HOA charter, actually read the damn thing, unlike most homeowners, and found the relevant clause. Earth tone variations appropriate to neighborhood aesthetic. Navy blue qualifies as earth tone at any paint store. The ocean's part of Earth, right? But when I knocked on Vivian's door with my documentation and a Home Depot color chart, her response made my blood pressure spike. Military colors send the wrong message in a family neighborhood, Jake. We need residents who understand community standards. Standing in her marble foyer, surrounded by crystal figurines worth more than my monthly pension, I realized this wasn't about paint colors. This was about putting the working-class veteran in his place before he lowered property values with his blue-collar existence. That night, sitting in my garage workshop with a beer, I could hear the suburban soundtrack, distant leaf blowers, highway traffic, the gentle hum of central air units working overtime. This was supposed to be my sanctuary after years of military chaos and divorce hell. But when those city permits appeared on telephone poles the next morning, Community Mailbox Relocation Project, Installation Site, 47 Maple Street. I knew Vivian Ashworth had just made the biggest mistake of her HOA presidency. She'd picked a fight with someone who fixes things for a living. The permits were just the beginning. What Vivian pulled next made my 20 years of Navy problem-solving kick into overdrive, because this wasn't amateur hour. This was professional-grade psychological warfare. Tuesday morning found me at the county courthouse, hunting through dusty file cabinets like I was tracking down a faulty wire in a helicopter's electrical system. The musty smell of old paper and bureaucratic indifference filled my nostrils as I pulled Vivian's property survey from the records. What I found made my hands literally shake with rage. The survey she'd filed with the city showed a community easement strip running 12 feet into my front yard, land that technically belonged to county right-of-way, perfect for public infrastructure projects. Clean, legal, and completely fabricated. I'd learned in the Navy that when something looks too convenient, you dig deeper. The real 1994 survey told a different story. No easement, no right-of-way, just my property line exactly where it should be. But here's where it got interesting. The signature on Vivian's fake survey belonged to her brother-in-law, the same surveyor who'd mapped this entire subdivision back in the day. The same guy who lost his license in 2018 for falsifying boundaries on commercial developments. I drove straight to Eddie's house, my truck's engine still ticking from the heat as I spread the documents across his kitchen table. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead like an angry hornet while Eddie squinted through his reading glasses. "Dat woman," he muttered, tracing the survey lines with his weathered finger. "She is like snake in tall grass, always watching, always planning." That's when Eddie dropped the real bombshell. From his meticulously organized filing cabinet, the man keeps records like a Pentagon archivist, he pulled out HOA meeting minutes from March 2019. There, in official black ink on letterhead, was a list titled, "Properties Requiring Community Standards Intervention." My address sat right at the top, 18 months before I'd even seen the house. The listed reason made my blood boil. Non-conforming owner demographic projected to negatively impact surrounding property values upon purchase. They'd profiled me from my mortgage application. Divorced veteran, handyman business, blue-collar income, everything their suburban paradise was designed to exclude. This whole mailbox nightmare wasn't about community mail delivery. It was phase one of a calculated campaign to bankrupt me through legal fees and violations until I sold at a loss and disappeared. I'd seen this kind of systematic targeting in military intelligence. Isolate the target, apply pressure from multiple angles, force compliance or retreat. Except Vivian had made one critical error in her battle plan. She assumed a Navy mechanic wouldn't know how to fight back on her sophisticated suburban battlefield. Time to prove her wrong. I found her the next afternoon loading organic groceries into her spotless Lexus at Whole Foods. 3 other HOA board members hovered nearby like bodyguards, but I walked straight up anyway, my work boots crunching on the scattered shopping cart debris. "Vivian, we need to talk." She turned with that practiced smile, car keys singing their metallic song in her manicured hand. "Oh, Jake, how are you settling into our lovely community?" "I know about the forged survey," I said quietly, keeping my voice level and professional. "The premeditated targeting, the coordination with your brother-in-law, all of it." For exactly 2 seconds, her mask slipped. I caught the flash of genuine fear in her eyes before she recovered, but those 2 seconds told me everything. The smell of car exhaust mixed with her expensive perfume as a shopping cart rattled past us, pushed by a harried mother with 2 screaming kids. "I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about," she replied smoothly. "We simply follow established community guidelines for everyone's benefit." But I'd already seen what I needed. The slight tremor in her hands as she fumbled with her keys, the way her voice pitched just half a note higher. Vivian Ashworth, suburban puppet master, was rattled for the first time in years. "This conversation isn't over," I told her. "No," she agreed, her smile sharpening like a blade. "It most certainly is not." 24 hours later, my doorbell rang at 7 a.m. sharp. Code enforcement, complete with official badges and clipboards thick enough to choke a horse. Unlicensed home business operation. My handyman tools clearly visible through the open garage door. Fire safety violation. Propane tanks properly stored for my work truck. Municipal noise ordinance breach. Apparently using a circular saw at 8:30 a.m. on Saturday morning was now illegal. Each violation carried a $200 fine with immediate compliance demanded. Standing in my driveway, watching this inspector photograph my completely legal equipment while the morning sun heated the asphalt beneath our feet, I realized Vivian's reach extended far beyond HOA politics. This woman had city hall contacts and she wasn't afraid to use them. But if she wanted to escalate this fight beyond neighborhood drama into full bureaucratic warfare, I was ready to show her what a veteran with too much time and a very specific set of skills could accomplish. Game on, Vivian. If Vivian wanted to play dirty, I was about to discover just how deep her bag of suburban warfare tricks really went. What happened next taught me that neighborhood politics can be deadlier than military combat. At least in the Navy, you know who your enemies are. Within 48 hours of our parking lot confrontation, anonymous flyers started appearing throughout the neighborhood like propaganda leaflets. Professional printing on glossy paper that felt expensive between my fingers, with headlines screaming, "Concerned about your property investment?" The text never mentioned my name, but the message was surgical in its precision. Transient lifestyle choices of certain residents created documented threats to neighborhood stability and family safety. I found one tucked under my truck's wiper blade Tuesday morning, the paper damp with dew and smelling of fresh ink and fresh betrayal. Her social media blitzkrieg was even more sophisticated. The Pinewood Springs Homeowners Facebook group, 432 members who used to mind their own business, suddenly buzzed with posts about background verification failures and protecting our children from unspecified dangers lurking in their midst. 3 neighbors who used to wave when I mowed my lawn now crossed the street when they saw me coming. The suburban version of being blacklisted, and it stung worse than I expected. That's when Eddie Kowalski proved why old-school Polish immigrants make the best allies. Over bitter coffee in his cluttered garage, surrounded by the comfortable smell of motor oil and decades of honest work, he laid out Vivian's complete playbook. "De Hendersons on Elm Street," he began, pulling out a manila folder thick as a Bible. "Nice black family, 2 kids, never caused no trouble. She start with basketball hoop complaints, too noisy for family neighborhood. Den comes violation notices like machine gun fire." I flipped through Eddie's meticulous documentation while his ancient radio crackled with morning talk shows. Photos, timeline charts, legal correspondence. This man had been building a case against Vivian for years. Grass height violations, mailbox wrong shade, Christmas lights one day past January 1st. 8 months, $30,000 in legal fees, forced sale below market value. Pattern never changes. From military intelligence training, I recognize the systematic approach. Isolate target through social pressure, overwhelm with bureaucratic harassment, forced capitulation through financial exhaustion. Psychological warfare, suburban addition. Thursday morning brought the main assault. Concrete trucks rolled up at dawn like an armored division, their diesel engines rumbling loud enough to wake half the neighborhood. The ground vibrated under my boots as I filmed 16 massive mailbox units being planted where my prize azaleas used to bloom. The postal supervisor, Martinez, looked as confused as I felt. During his crew's water break, he wiped sweat from his weathered face and shook his head. "Makes no operational sense, this location. Should have gone at subdivision entrance on city property. But your HOA paid $15,000 expedite fee for this exact spot. $15,000 for a $3,000 job." That evening I overheard Martinez on his phone outside his truck. "Traffic nightmare, blocked sight lines, adds 45 minutes to every route." But the HOA lady insisted on premium placement. Right then, I realized Vivian wasn't just harassing me. She was embezzling community funds to finance her personal war. Every homeowner in Pinewood Springs was unknowingly paying for my destruction. The beautiful irony? While documenting the installation's impact for my growing evidence file, I discovered Vivian had outsmarted herself. The awkward placement created multiple municipal code violations, blocked emergency access, hazardous sightline obstructions, illegal interference with postal operations. Her perfect revenge weapon was actually perfectly illegal. Within days, reality delivered its own justice. Mail deliveries stretched an extra hour daily. 3 fender benders happened at the corner because drivers couldn't see around the massive units. Mrs. Rosalie called 911 when an ambulance couldn't reach her house through the mail truck bottleneck. But Vivian's response to mounting complaints showed true desperation. Emergency HOA meeting, 24 hours notice, flagrant violation of 7-day minimum requirements. Only 12 homeowners out of 340 showed up, but she declared valid quorum anyway. Her agenda? Special assessment of $500 per household for a legal defense fund. Translation: make everyone pay for lawyers to protect her fraudulent mailbox scheme. That's when Maria Santos proved angels come in scrubs. The night shift nurse agreed to attend and secretly record everything on her iPhone despite knowing Vivian's retaliation history. What we captured was pure gold. Sometimes you have to make examples of people who don't understand how things work in a quality neighborhood. Her own words, admitting punitive intent, recorded by a credible witness. But Vivian's escalation wasn't finished. Friday night, 4 slashed truck tires, razor cuts precise as surgical incisions. Saturday morning, garage door mechanism superglued shut, requiring crowbar destruction to get my tools. Sunday evening, garden hose cut in 3 places, flooding my basement with 2 inches of water that already smelled like growing mold and crushed dreams. No proof, no witnesses, but the message was clear as military code: surrender or face total destruction. Standing in my soggy basement, water squishing under my work boots while I surveyed thousands in damaged equipment, I made the decision that would change everything. If Vivian wanted to escalate beyond neighborhood politics into actual warfare, she was about to learn what 20 years of Navy problem-solving could accomplish when a veteran stops playing defense. Time to go on the offensive. Time to stop playing defense. 20 years of Navy training had taught me that when someone declares war on you, the smartest move isn't retreat. It's bringing superior firepower to the battlefield. My first counterstrike targeted Vivian's greatest weakness: her overconfidence in a system she thought she controlled. Tuesday morning found me at the state capitol, navigating fluorescent-lit hallways that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. The HOA oversight board clerk looked bored until I spread my evidence across her metal desk: forged surveys, procedural violations, and a timeline showing systematic harassment spanning multiple homeowners. This documentation is remarkably thorough, she admitted, adjusting her glasses as she photographed each page. The camera flash reflected off the institutional white walls while she worked. We'll assign an investigator within 30 days. But my real weapon was Maria's recording. Vivian's own voice admitting punitive intent, legal gold that transformed neighborhood harassment into potential criminal charges. Sometimes the best evidence comes from letting your enemy talk long enough to hang herself. Wednesday brought Vivian's predictable counterattack, and it reeked of desperation. Emergency HOA meeting with hired security, 2 off-duty cops she'd enlisted to maintain community safety. The agenda read like a legal execution: declare Jake Morrison's property a community nuisance, invoke Charter Section 47B for forced sale, except she'd made a fatal tactical error. The community center smelled of stale coffee and institutional fear as only 4 board members showed up, 3 short of the quorum needed for property seizure votes. I watched Vivian's face flush red as she realized the same legal technicalities that had trapped her previous victims now protected me. "Invalid meeting without proper quorum," announced Tom Bradley, the retired teacher who'd quietly joined our resistance. His voice echoed off the cheap paneled walls. "Motion to adjourn." Vivian's perfectly manicured hands literally trembled as she gathered her scattered papers. "This isn't finished, Morrison." "No, ma'am," I agreed, standing slowly. "But the next move is mine." That evening, Eddie delivered intelligence that changed everything. He knocked on my door at 11 p.m., his weathered face grim in the yellow porch light. "That white sedan, 3 weeks now on Maple Street," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "I got nephew at DMV, private investigator, registered to Ashworth Properties." Vivian had been running surveillance on me, but she'd picked the wrong target for a spy operation. The Navy teaches you to notice things. Unusual patterns, repeated faces, vehicles that don't belong. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching her watcher for days. I spent the next 72 hours turning her surveillance against her. Using storefront reflections, timing patterns, and patience learned in engine rooms where one mistake could kill you, I built a complete profile of her private investigator. The beautiful truth emerged like sunrise after a long watch. Vivian's spy was her nephew, fresh out of community college with a mail-order detective certificate. When I cross-referenced his credentials with state licensing requirements, I hit the jackpot. No valid PI license, no insurance, no legal authority to conduct surveillance. Her illegal spying operation had just become my evidence. But the community rebellion brewing around us revealed Vivian's biggest strategic miscalculation. Those 16 mailbox units hadn't just destroyed my lawn, they'd created a traffic nightmare that affected everyone. Eddie's informal door-to-door survey revealed stunning numbers. 67% of residents wanted the mailboxes relocated, mail delivery delays averaged 45 minutes daily, and we'd had 5 minor accidents at the problematic intersection in 2 weeks. Her signature project had become her greatest liability. Vivian's response? Pure scorched earth tactics. Friday afternoon, I found myself served with a restraining order alleging I'd made threatening gestures and used intimidating language during our parking lot conversation. Complete fiction, but it meant another court date, more legal fees, more time away from work. Sitting in my truck outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun beating through the windshield while I read her fabricated accusations, I understood something crucial about suburban warfare. The system favored whoever could afford the most lawyers and waste the most time on bureaucratic battles. But Vivian had forgotten that veterans are trained to win against superior forces using unconventional methods. That weekend, while she assumed her legal maneuvering had neutralized me, I was conducting engineering reconnaissance in my garage. Those mailbox installations weren't just neighborhood eyesores, they were structural vulnerabilities. Quick-set concrete, shallow foundations, poor weight distribution, built for speed, not permanence. From my Navy days maintaining equipment in harsh conditions, I recognized hastily installed infrastructure when I saw it. Perfect for creative problem solving. Sunday evening, Maria arrived with coffee and game-changing intelligence. Her network of healthcare colleagues had been quietly auditing HOA finances, and what they'd discovered made my head spin. Jake, she's been systematically stealing from every family here, Maria explained, her nurse's precision evident in the spreadsheet she unfolded. Fake emergency repairs, inflated contractor bills, unauthorized legal fees. The pattern goes back 3 years. The numbers were staggering. Tens of thousands in fraudulent expenditures, all disguised as community improvements and legal necessities. Standing in my garage workshop surrounded by tools that had solved problems from aircraft carriers to leaky kitchen faucets, I realized this fight had evolved beyond property lines and paint colors. Vivian Ashworth was a criminal who'd been robbing her neighbors blind, and I was the only one positioned to stop her. Time to engineer a solution that would expose her crimes while solving the mailbox problem permanently. But first, I needed to scout the perfect location for those displaced postal units. Somewhere highly visible, impossible to ignore, and belonging to someone who definitely deserved an unexpected delivery. Vivian's corner mansion, with its pristine circular driveway, was looking more perfect by the hour. The discovery that changed everything came from the most unlikely source, a dusty banker's box hidden behind Eddie's workbench filled with 3 years of documents his late wife had insisted he keep. "Maria always say dat woman is stealing from us," Eddie whispered, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he opened the box. The musty smell of old paper mixed with garage oil while he spread financial records across his cluttered workbench. "She make me promise to document everything." What we found inside made my blood run cold and my heart race simultaneously. Vivian hadn't just been harassing residents, she'd been systematically robbing them blind. Fake contractor invoices for repairs that never happened, legal fees for non-existent lawsuits, administrative costs that would embarrass Pentagon accountants. The numbers were staggering. $127,000 embezzled over 3 years from hardworking families who trusted their HOA president. But Maria's discovery, buried in our original subdivision covenants, was the game changer that shifted everything in our favor. "Jake, look at this," she said, her nurse's precision evident as she traced faded typewriter text with her finger. Section 12C, Emergency Infrastructure Relocation Clause. Any homeowner can temporarily relocate hazardous community installations that pose documented safety risks. I read those words 3 times, my pulse hammering like I'd just spotted enemy aircraft on radar. The 1990s developers had included this provision to prevent exactly what Vivian had created, dangerous infrastructure placement that endangered residents. Her mailbox installation violated everything. Blocked emergency access, created sightline hazards, interfered with school buses, caused daily traffic nightmares. Under the original covenant, I had legal authority to move them immediately. No permits required, no HOA approval needed. Just documented safety violations and emergency action. But Eddie's next revelation was the perfect cherry on top of our legal sundae. "Dat mansion where she live?" He unfolded a property survey map, his thick finger pointing to boundary lines. "Outside HOA territory completely. She buy in 1998 before expansion. No rules apply to her." The beautiful irony hit me like a wrench to the head. Vivian Ashworth, neighborhood dictator extraordinaire, lived beyond the reach of her own tyrannical system. Her 1.3-acre corner lot with its pristine circular driveway was legally immune to HOA restrictions. Perfect location for 16 displaced mailbox units. Maria's follow-up research revealed the crown jewel of Vivian's hypocrisy. Tax records showed she'd been claiming residential homestead exemption while operating Ashworth Properties LLC from the same address. Textbook tax fraud that would fascinate both the IRS and state revenue officials. "She's been double-dipping for years," Maria explained, organizing documents with surgical precision. "Residential tax rates for her personal benefit while running a commercial business. Federal crime territory." The scope of Vivian's criminal operation crystallized like metal cooling after welding. This wasn't neighborhood harassment. This was organized fraud, with my harassment serving as cover for systematic community theft. But Eddie's final intelligence brief revealed the truly chilling truth behind everything. "My neighbor work for city planning," he said, glancing toward his kitchen window. "She tell me Vivian been lobbying council for commercial rezoning of entire Pinewood Springs, higher taxes, force out working families, sell to developers." Every piece clicked into place with mechanical precision. The harassment campaigns, the forced sales, the embezzlement, all part of a long-term gentrification scheme designed to transform our neighborhood into commercial property. I wasn't just a harassment target. I was an obstacle to Vivian's multi-million-dollar development plan. Standing in that cluttered garage, surrounded by evidence of years of systematic crime disguised as community leadership, something fundamental shifted inside me. The taste of motor oil and stale coffee couldn't mask the electricity of understanding. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice for every family Vivian had victimized. Those mailboxes weren't staying on my property another day. And when they appeared in Vivian's driveway tomorrow morning, perfectly positioned to block her garage and announce her crimes to the entire neighborhood, she'd learn what happens when you underestimate a Navy veteran with the law on his side. Time to plan the most legally bulletproof relocation operation in suburban history. The beauty of 20 years in Navy engineering is learning that every impossible mission becomes possible with proper planning, the right team, and equipment that doesn't break when you need it most. Tuesday evening, my garage transformed into a tactical operations center that would make any military quartermaster proud. Eddie arrived first, carrying coffee strong enough to dissolve concrete and 40 years of electrical expertise. Maria followed with legal documentation organized like surgical instruments. Tom Bradley brought his teacher's communication skills and a contact list of neighbors ready for revolution. "Listen up, people," I announced, spreading equipment catalogs across my workbench while overhead fluorescent lights hummed like distant aircraft. "This is precision operation with zero margin for error. No improvisation, no legal shortcuts, no excuses." Our first breakthrough came from Eddie's family connections. His son-in-law Mike owned Kowalski Construction, small operation specializing in residential projects and owing Eddie approximately 50 lifetime favors. Mike arrived Wednesday morning with intelligence that made everything possible. "Those mailbox foundations are amateur hour," he explained, studying my installation photos with professional disgust. "Quickset concrete, maybe 18 inches deep, no rebar reinforcement whatsoever." His calloused finger traced structural weak points like a demolition expert planning controlled explosions. "Hydraulic lift and concrete cutting saw. We extract those units clean in 30 minutes per cluster. Built for speed, not permanence. Classic municipal contractor shortcuts." Here's something most people don't realize. Emergency infrastructure relocation is perfectly legal in most municipalities, but only if you document safety hazards properly and follow established protocols. Maria's legal research had uncovered Municipal Code 847C, which allows homeowners to relocate dangerous community installations after filing proper emergency action notices. I'd already photographed every violation: blocked emergency vehicle access, hazardous sight lines, school bus interference, daily traffic backups. The documentation was bulletproof. This wasn't vandalism. It was legal emergency response to protect community safety. The technical challenge wasn't extraction. It was precision transportation and installation. 16 units at 400 pounds each, plus concrete foundations, required serious equipment and surgical planning. My buddy Stanisław owes me from kitchen renovation last year, Eddie volunteered, his accent thickening with excitement. He bring crane truck, no questions, family business discount, very reliable, very discreet. Timing was critical for operational security. We needed weather cover for equipment noise, minimal traffic exposure, and maximum psychological impact on our target. National Weather Service predicts severe thunderstorms Thursday night, Tom reported, consulting his phone like mission intelligence. Heavy rain, wind, thunder from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., perfect acoustic camouflage for construction operations. I traced our route on tablet maps while the team watched, marking complications like a pilot avoiding weather systems. 12 minutes from extraction site to installation target. Vivian's pristine corner mansion, with its circular driveway perfectly designed for hosting displaced mailbox clusters. Equipment stages at Eddie's garage 10 p.m. sharp, I outlined, finger following digital streets. Begin extraction 11:30 when storm peaks. Load, transport, install, cleanup completed by 3 a.m. Everyone home before morning commute witnesses anything. The psychological warfare component required equal precision. Vivian needed to discover her mailbox delivery at maximum impact, when neighbors could witness her reaction and media could document community response. Thursday morning, I alert Channel 7 about mysterious overnight infrastructure relocation, Tom volunteered with teachers' enthusiasm for justice. Sarah Rosalie covered my school board corruption expose last year. She'll have cameras rolling when Vivian finds her surprise delivery. Maria's documentation strategy controlled the entire narrative arc. Complete time-lapse photography, witness statements from safety-concerned residents, official violation reports filed with code enforcement, legal protection through comprehensive evidence trail. But Eddie's tactical contribution was pure genius, born from decades of neighborhood observation. Vivian's property has security cameras, motion sensor floods, he noted, sketching her layout from memory. We need official appearance, make it look like emergency municipal maintenance. Mike grinned, producing magnetic contractor signs from his toolbox. Emergency Infrastructure Services, Municipal Contract Division. Completely legitimate. That's exactly what we're providing. The final element required understanding our target's psychology and schedule vulnerabilities. Vivian's Thursday routine, yoga class, Tuesday, book club Thursday evening, luxury salon appointment Friday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. Perfect timing for her to return home around 9:30 a.m. to discover 16 steel monuments blocking her garage and announcing her crimes to gathering neighbors. Critical point, I emphasized, distributing printed copies of relevant statutes. Everyone carries legal documentation proving this operation follows established emergency protocols. If questioned by authorities, we're concerned citizens protecting community safety under municipal code authority. Standing in my workshop sanctuary, surrounded by neighbors committed to justice and armed with legal authority, I felt something missing since leaving military service. The deep satisfaction of impossible mission planned with precision and executed with honor. Those mailboxes were about to find their perfect permanent home, and Vivian Ashworth was about to discover what happens when you wage war against people who actually know how to fight back. Storm clouds were already gathering on Thursday's horizon. By Thursday morning, desperation hung in the air thicker than the approaching storm clouds, and it wasn't coming from my team. Vivian had sensed the growing rebellion, and her response revealed exactly how far a cornered suburban dictator would go to protect her criminal empire. The first warning shot came at dawn when I discovered Margaret Fitzgerald, one of Vivian's last loyal board members, standing in my driveway photographing my house like a crime scene investigator. The metallic click of her phone camera mixed with morning bird songs created the most suburban soundtrack of surveillance I'd ever heard. "Morning, Margaret," I called out, coffee steam rising between us in the cool air. "Documenting community standards this early?" She jumped like I'd fired a starter pistol, her expensive manicure nearly dropping the phone as she stumbled backward toward the street with all the grace of a guilty teenager caught smoking. "Just ensuring compliance with established guidelines," she stammered, but I caught the fear flickering in her eyes. Word was spreading through Vivian's network that something big was coming, and they were scrambling to build defenses. Eddie's intelligence report during our morning briefing revealed the scope of her panic. Emergency board meeting called for 7 p.m. Thursday, exactly when we'd be staging equipment for tonight's operation. But in her desperation, Vivian had made a critical tactical error. "She forget proper notification rules again," Eddie explained, his thick accent mixing with the smell of his paint-stripping coffee. 48 hours required, unanimous board consent for emergency sessions. She got neither. Maria, armed with parliamentary procedure knowledge from 8 years on hospital committees, had already filed formal objections with the county clerk. Her meeting is legally invalid, she announced with surgical precision. But more importantly, it establishes premeditated malicious intent when this reaches court. The sabotage campaign escalated throughout the day like barometric pressure building before a hurricane. My work truck's windshield acquired a spiderweb crack, not enough to shatter completely, just perfectly positioned to obstruct vision and require expensive replacement. Someone had targeted my garage locks with superglue again, forcing me to cut my way into my own workshop with bolt cutters that sparked against metal in the morning heat. But the most sophisticated attack hit where it hurt most: my financial security. Checking insurance status online revealed a nightmare. Policy canceled, effective immediately, reason listed as high-risk neighborhood designation due to ongoing community disputes. Vivian had insurance company contacts, and she wasn't afraid to weaponize them. Standing in my kitchen, staring at the cancellation notice while distant thunder provided ominous background percussion, I understood her strategic thinking. No insurance coverage meant any storm damage during tonight's operation would come directly from my pocket. Psychological warfare designed to make me financially vulnerable at the worst possible moment. Except she'd underestimated something crucial. Veterans learn to operate under pressure, not retreat from it. Eddie's afternoon surveillance report revealed her desperation had reached new peaks. Professional security company, 2 guards in unmarked sedan, he noted, pointing toward black car positioned at subdivision entrance like a military checkpoint. Expensive muscle, not volunteer neighborhood watch. The beautiful irony was that Vivian's escalation proved everything we suspected about her criminal operation. Innocent HOA presidents don't hire armed security to intimidate residents. They don't cancel insurance policies or coordinate sophisticated surveillance networks. She was behaving exactly like someone with $127,000 in embezzled community funds to protect. Here's what most people don't know about emergency infrastructure relocation. The more desperately property owners try to prevent it, the stronger your legal justification becomes. Vivian's intimidation campaign was actually building our court case for us. Mini twist. Tom's media contact delivered unexpected intelligence that changed everything. Sarah Rosalie from Channel 7 had been investigating HOA corruption across 3 counties, and Vivian was already on her investigative radar. We've documented financial irregularities in 2 other communities where she provided consulting services, Sarah explained during our conference call. Your mailbox story could be the smoking gun that exposes a regional embezzlement network. Our neighborhood property dispute had accidentally uncovered organized crime disguised as community management, but Vivian's final desperate gambit arrived at 4 p.m. via certified mail. Legal letterhead thick enough to choke a horse and threats of criminal prosecution for planned vandalism and theft of community property. Someone had leaked intelligence about tonight's operation. Reading the cease and desist order twice while rain began pattering against my kitchen window, I called an emergency team meeting. Either we had security breach or Vivian's surveillance was more sophisticated than anticipated. She's desperate and making mistakes, Maria announced after reviewing the legal threats. This document admits mailboxes are community property, which means they definitely don't belong on your private land. She just provided written evidence supporting our relocation authority. Eddie's weathered face cracked into a grin that belonged in high-stakes poker games. Scared people always overplay their hand. She just showed us her cards. As storm clouds gathered like nature's tactical support and evening approached with military precision, I realized Vivian's escalation had made tonight's mission even more critical. Her behavior proved she was dangerous, desperate, and willing to use any method necessary to maintain criminal control over our community. Those mailboxes weren't just getting relocated, they were becoming evidence in a federal case. Perfect weather was moving in, and sometimes justice requires exactly the right storm conditions. The storm hit Pinewood Springs like nature's own tactical support, and by 10 p.m. thunder was rolling across our suburban battlefield with the authority of distant artillery. Rain hammered my garage roof in steady percussion that would mask the sound of diesel engines and concrete saws. Perfect acoustic cover for the most audacious midnight engineering project in HOA history. Eddie arrived first, his ancient pickup cutting through sheets of rain that turned my driveway into a temporary river. the smell of wet asphalt mixed with ozone and anticipation as we transferred equipment between garages, concrete cutting gear, hydraulic jacks, work lights, and enough extension cord to power a small military installation. "Dis storm is gift from Polish angels," he grinned, rainwater streaming off his surplus navy jacket while lightning illuminated his weathered face. "Even Vivian's fancy security guards won't hear chainsaw in this beautiful noise." Maria arrived at 10:15 with nurse-level punctuality unaffected by biblical weather. She'd brought waterproof document cases and professional camera equipment for comprehensive legal documentation, our insurance policy against criminal charges or civil lawsuits. "Channel 7 standing by for exclusive morning coverage," she reported over the drumbeat of rain against Eddie's garage door. "Sarah Rosalie wants first interview when Vivian discovers her special delivery." Mike Kowalski rolled up at 10:30 sharp with the heavy equipment convoy, flatbed truck equipped with hydraulic crane, magnetic contractor signs reading emergency infrastructure services, and the kind of diesel authority that makes suburban streets tremble. In this storm, we'd look like legitimate municipal repair crew handling weather emergency. "Extraction targets mapped and timed," he announced, unfolding waterproof survey charts while hail bounced off his truck's hood like angry marbles. 16 units, 4 installation clusters, 30-minute total removal, if equipment cooperates, and concrete cuts clean. The technical challenge was surgical precision in nightmare conditions. Concrete sawing in driving rain, hydraulic crane operations on flooded surfaces, heavy lifting with wind gusts approaching 50 miles per hour. But sometimes the worst conditions provide the best operational security. At 11 p.m., Tom delivered intelligence that nearly changed our timeline. Security guards just abandoned their posts, black sedan heading toward town, probably seeking indoor shelter from this weather beating. Vivian's expensive protection had chosen dry comfort over professional duty. Their security breach became our tactical advantage. 11:30 p.m., mission launch authorized. Mike's diesel rumbled to life with mechanical confidence while Eddie and I loaded cutting equipment. The storm was peaking exactly as meteorologists predicted. Thunder loud enough to mask power tools, rain heavy enough to wash away forensic evidence, wind strong enough to keep nosy neighbors safely indoors. We engaged the first mailbox cluster at 11:45. The concrete saw roared like an angry beast, throwing sparks that disappeared instantly in the torrential downpour. What should have been a tension-grabbing industrial noise became just another storm sound in a symphony of mechanical fury. Mike's crane lifted each 400-pound unit with surgical precision while I guided them onto the flatbed through curtains of rain. Steel and concrete moving through darkness like military cargo on covert supply mission. Invisible, efficient, unstoppable. The discovery that made everything perfect. Buried beneath the third cluster's foundation, we found a waterproof metal box containing master keys to every mailbox unit, evidence that Vivian had been intercepting resident mail to monitor financial information and identify problem households. Federal mail tampering charges just joined her expanding criminal portfolio. By 1 a.m., all 16 units were secured on the flatbed like massive chess pieces ready for strategic repositioning. The extraction site looked virgin, just rain-filled holes that morning runoff would disguise as natural erosion. We'd made industrial infrastructure vanish without leaving investigative traces. Transport phase required different expertise, navigating crane truck through suburban streets during peak storm conditions, following GPS coordinates to target destination while maintaining legal speeds and avoiding flood-prone intersections where evidence might literally sink our mission. 12 minutes of careful navigation delivered us to Oakwood Drive, where Vivian's corner mansion sat dark and unsuspecting in the meteorological chaos. Her circular driveway was architecturally perfect for our purposes, like she'd designed it specifically to host displaced community mailbox installations. Installation became poetry in motion, choreographed by rain and illuminated by lightning. Mike positioned the crane with millimeter accuracy while I guided each unit into formation through hand signals and shared understanding. 16 steel monuments arranged in geometric precision, completely blocking garage access while creating unmistakable statement about community property accountability. The storm provided both concealment and urgency. Finish before dawn patrol, evacuate before witnesses, document everything for bulletproof legal protection. At 2:15 a.m., I placed the operational capstone, Laminated notice explaining emergency relocation under Municipal Code 847C, complete with safety violation documentation and official contact information for filing disputes. Professional, legal, absolutely unassailable. Cleanup was military standard protocol. Equipment secured, installation site polished until no operational evidence remained. By 2:45 a.m., we were rolling through empty streets while the storm continued its perfect concealment symphony. Back in Eddie's garage, sitting in folding chairs with coffee that could strip paint, we reviewed photographic documentation of our night's engineering accomplishment. Rain still hammered overhead like applause from heaven. "Vivian gonna have very educational morning," Eddie chuckled, his work-worn hands wrapped around steaming salvation. Maria checked her watch with hospital shift precision. 6 hours until discovery. Camera crews positioned by 8:30 a.m. sharp. Standing in that cluttered sanctuary, surrounded by neighbors who'd risked everything for community justice, I experienced something missing since leaving Navy service. The profound satisfaction of impossible mission accomplished through planning, teamwork, and absolute commitment to doing what's morally right. Those mailboxes had found their permanent, perfect home. And in exactly 6 hours, Vivian Ashworth would learn the ultimate lesson about picking fights with people who actually understand tactical warfare. At 6:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text that made 20 years of military training worth every sleepless night. "Package delivered and discovered. Fireworks starting now. Eddie." I grabbed my coffee and drove straight to Oakwood Drive, where I found the most beautiful sight in suburban warfare history. Vivian Ashworth stood in her pristine bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, staring at 16 steel mailbox monuments perfectly positioned in her circular driveway, like a modern Stonehenge built from community hypocrisy. Her white Lexus sat trapped in the garage, blocked by 6,400 pounds of relocated postal infrastructure that she couldn't move, couldn't ignore, and definitely couldn't explain away. The gathering crowd was pure theater. Neighbors from 3 different streets had materialized like they'd received engraved invitations, drawn by the kind of suburban drama that makes people forget their morning routines. Mrs. Rosalie stood there with her coffee mug, shaking her head in amazement. The Henderson family, back to visit friends after Vivian drove them out, pointed and laughed with the satisfaction of vindicated victims. "What is this?" Vivian shrieked, her perfectly coiffed hair looking less perfect after her panicked sprint outside. "Who did this to my property?" That's when I stepped forward, my work boots crunching on her decorative gravel while the morning sun illuminated our masterpiece. "Morning, Vivian. Those are the community mailboxes you illegally installed on my property. I relocated them under Municipal Code 847C for emergency safety compliance." Her face went through more color changes than a traffic light having an electrical seizure. "This is vandalism, theft. I'm calling the police." "Already here," announced Officer Martinez, emerging from his patrol car with the weary expression of someone who dealt with HOA disputes before. 2 more squad cars pulled up, followed by a Channel 7 news van that looked like it had been racing to cover breaking news. Vivian practically sprinted toward the officers, her slippers making ridiculous slapping sounds against wet pavement. "Arrest him! He stole community property and dumped it on my lawn!" Officer Martinez examined my laminated notice, read the municipal code citations, and studied photos of the original safety violations I'd documented. His partner walked around the installation, taking measurements and noting the professional placement. "Ma'am, this appears to be legal emergency relocation," Martinez announced after 5 minutes of investigation. "All proper documentation, legitimate safety concerns, installation meets Postal Service requirements." That's when Sarah Rosalie from Channel 7 stepped up with her camera crew. "Mrs. Ashworth, can you explain why community mailboxes were installed on private property without homeowner consent?" Vivian's media training kicked in, but panic made her sloppy. "We followed all proper procedures for community improvement projects." "What about the financial irregularities?" Sarah pressed, consulting notes that looked suspiciously like Maria's documentation. "Our investigation shows $127,000 in questionable HOA expenditures over 3 years. The color drained from Vivian's face like someone had pulled a plug. That's completely unfounded." But Eddie chose that moment to emerge from the crowd carrying the metal box we'd discovered during extraction. "Officer Martinez, we found disc buried under mailbox installation. contains master keys and resident mail monitoring records. The cop's expression shifted from bored bureaucrat to serious investigator as he examined evidence of federal mail tampering. "Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions about postal interference and financial irregularities." The crowd was growing larger and more vocal. Tom Bradley started distributing flyers explaining Vivian's embezzlement scheme. Maria handed out copies of forged documents and harassment timelines. People who'd been afraid to speak up for years suddenly found their voices. "She forced us out with fake violations," called Mrs. Henderson. "Stole our assessment money for personal use," shouted Mike's neighbor from Oak Street. "Discriminated against veterans and minorities." Eddie's voice carried over the growing chorus of community anger. That's when I delivered the line that would make suburban legend. "Vivian, you spent 3 years teaching this neighborhood that actions have consequences. Consider this your final exam." Her response was pure suburban meltdown. She screamed about property values, threatened lawsuits, and demanded everyone leave her lawn immediately. But 16 steel mailboxes don't care about property values, and neither did the 40-plus residents who'd finally found courage to stand up to their neighborhood tyrant. The postal supervisor arrived during peak chaos, took one look at our installation, and nodded approvingly. "Much better location than the original. Proper sight lines, adequate traffic flow, meets all safety requirements. We'll make this the permanent site." Vivian's scream could probably be heard in the next county. But the best moment came when state HOA investigator Rebecca Walsh arrived with a briefcase full of criminal referrals and enough evidence to put Vivian away for financial fraud. "Mrs. Ashworth, you're under investigation for embezzlement, mail tampering, and violation of fiduciary duty. We'll need you to come with us for questioning." The crowd erupted in cheers as Vivian was escorted to an unmarked car, still wearing her bathrobe and the expression of someone who'd just realized their criminal empire was crumbling in real time. Standing in her driveway, surrounded by neighbors who were finally free to speak their minds, I watched justice being served with military precision and community solidarity. Those mailboxes weren't just relocated infrastructure. They were monuments to the power of ordinary people who refused to be bullied by corrupt authority. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my garage workshop, organizing tools and reflecting on how dramatically our little neighborhood revolution changed everything. The sound of children playing basketball echoes from 3 streets over, music that Vivian's reign of terror had silenced for years. The immediate aftermath was swift and satisfying. Within 72 hours, Vivian Ashworth had resigned as HOA president, faced criminal charges for embezzlement and mail tampering, and become the most infamous suburban dictator in 3 counties. Her arrest photo, still wearing that ridiculous bathrobe, went viral on social media with captions like, "When Karens attack" and "HOA president discovers consequences." But the real victory was watching our community heal and rebuild. The emergency HOA election drew 89% voter turnout, highest in Pinewood Springs history. Eddie Kowalski became president by landslide margin, Maria Santos took treasurer position, and Tom Bradley handled communications with teacher-level organization skills. Their first act? Complete financial transparency with monthly reports posted online and mailed to every household. The criminal justice system moved with unusual efficiency when facing such overwhelming evidence. Vivian pled guilty to embezzlement, mail fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. 18 months probation, full restitution of $94,000 in recovered stolen funds, and community service that ironically involved helping other HOA abuse victims navigate legal protections. Sometimes karma writes its own punchlines. The civil lawsuit recovered most of the missing money, which the new board immediately put to community benefit. The Pinewood Springs Community Defense Fund now provides free legal aid for residents facing HOA harassment anywhere in the county. We've helped 12 families fight bogus violations, 3 neighborhoods expose financial fraud, and 1 veteran keep his emotional support animal despite discriminatory pet policies. My handyman business exploded after the media coverage. Turns out, Navy veteran who defeated corrupt HOA is excellent advertising for someone who fixes problems for a living. 6 months of referrals from grateful neighbors has me booked solid through next spring, with enough income to finally afford that workshop expansion I've been planning. But the personal changes matter more than financial success. Linda Patterson, the divorced teacher who moved in where the Hendersons used to live, has become a frequent visitor to my garage workshop, ostensibly for home repair consultations that somehow always involve sharing coffee and conversation about everything except broken faucets. Her laugh fills spaces in my life I didn't realize were empty. the neighborhood transformation is remarkable. Property values increased 12% over 6 months, not from Vivian's exclusionary tactics, but from genuine community improvement projects funded with recovered embezzlement money. New playground equipment, improved street lighting, neighborhood barbecues that bring people together instead of driving them apart. My navy blue mailbox still stands proudly at the curb, now joined by a growing collection of colorful neighbors who express their personalities through paint choices Vivian would have fined into extinction. The Kowalski family painted theirs Polish flag colors. Maria chose bright sunflower yellow that matches her optimistic spirit. Even Margaret Fitzgerald, Vivian's former loyalist, switched to forest green after discovering how much association dues had really been stolen. The scholarship program funded by recovered HOA money has already helped 2 local veterans pursue education goals. The conservation initiative restored native plants to common areas Vivian had converted to expensive ornamental landscaping. This summer's first annual Community Pride Festival drew families from surrounding neighborhoods who wanted to celebrate what positive HOA leadership could accomplish. But my favorite change is the simplest one. People wave again when I'm mowing my lawn. Children play in the streets without fear of violation notices. Neighbors help neighbors with projects instead of reporting them for code infractions. Pinewood Springs feels like the community I thought I was buying into when this whole adventure started. The mailboxes, permanently installed in Vivian's former driveway, have become an unofficial neighborhood landmark. Tour buses of HOA reform advocates sometimes stop to photograph the mailbox monument to community justice. Local news stations reference our story whenever HOA abuse cases make headlines. Law schools use our documentation as case study in effective grassroots legal resistance. Last week, my phone rang with a call that reminded me why this fight was bigger than one neighborhood dispute. Mr. Morrison, this is Staff Sergeant Williams from Colorado Springs. My HOA is trying to ban my service dog, and I heard you know how to fight these people. I looked at my organized garage, my collection of well-maintained tools, and my truck loaded with equipment for helping neighbors solve problems. Some things never change. There's always another bully who needs to learn that veterans don't back down from fights worth fighting. Sergeant, let me tell you about municipal codes, community organizing, and the beautiful sound 16 mailboxes make when they find their perfect new home.
So they're out there 6 months later, still running his handyman business, still living in the same house. The mailboxes, still sitting in Vivian's old driveway. The postal service made it permanent. You gotta love the irony. She spent all the money. What was this? $15,000 of community funds just to stick those mailboxes on his lawn. Now they are blocking the exact spot where her car used to be. I keep thinking about that emergency HOA meeting she tried to call. You know, the one where only 4 board members showed up. She was convinced she had the votes to label his house a community nuisance. Probably thought she steamrolled right away, same as always. But Jax had done something most people never bother with. He actually read the HOA bylaws, all of them, and he found out you need proper quorum for that kind of vote. It's funny how these neighborhood dictators always assume nobody paying attention to the fine print until someone like Jax comes along with a grasp on the power tools and 20-year military problem-solving experience. I'm curious, how many of you watching this have actually read the HOA covenants, start to finish? Because I'm betting more of you haven't, and that's exactly what people like Vivian are counting on. Look, if the scam story intrigued you, if you got your own HOA situation that has been keeping you up at night, stick around. Hit the like button if Jack's story made you smile even a little. Because there are a lot more stories like this out there. A lot more Vivians, and thankfully, a lot more Jacks.